The emergency lights painted the quiet suburban street in violent streaks of red and blue. Police cars lined Maple Street like a barricade against the darkness, their sirens now silent but their presence screaming danger. Officers in tactical gear moved with purpose across the manicured lawn of house number 47, while neighbors pressed against their windows, phones pressed to ears, desperate to understand what horror had unfolded in their peaceful community. But this story doesn't begin with sirens and shattered glass. It begins 3 weeks earlier in the sterile corridors of Riverside Medical Clinic, where a respected physician noticed something that would save 2 lives and expose a nightmare that had been hidden for years. What happens when the person meant to protect becomes the greatest threat? How does a brave young girl find the courage to break a silence that could have killed her? This is not just a story of crime, it's a testament to survival, maternal love, and the extraordinary power of speaking truth in the face of terror. The answers lie in the careful observations of one doctor who refused to look away when everything in him wanted to believe that some suspicions are better left unexplored. Dr. Elena Lam had been practicing family medicine for 15 years. Her colleagues respected her methodical approach, her patients trusted her gentle bedside manner, and her reputation for thoroughness had earned her recognition throughout the community. She was the kind of physician who noticed details others missed: the slight tremor in a patient's voice, the way someone held their shoulders, the stories told by eyes that couldn't quite meet hers. On a Thursday morning in October, she encountered a case that would test every instinct she'd developed over her career. The appointment was routine on paper. 16-year-old Lucia Reyes, accompanied by her guardian Marco Reyes for prenatal care. First pregnancy, approximately 20 weeks along. The file contained basic information, but Dr. Lam always preferred to form her own impressions. When Lucia entered the examination room, Dr. Lam immediately sensed something wrong. The girl moved like someone walking through a minefield, each step calculated, her eyes never lifting from the floor. Her guardian, whom she'd learned was actually her father, hovered close, answering questions before Lucia could speak. "She's been feeling fine," Marco said when Dr. Lam asked about symptoms. "No problems at all. Just wants to make sure the baby's healthy." But Lucia's body language told a different story. She flinched when Marco touched her shoulder. Her hands trembled when she undressed for the examination. Most troubling of all, when Dr. Lam asked gentle questions about the baby's father, Lucia's entire body went rigid with fear. "The boyfriend isn't in the picture anymore," Marco answered quickly. Lucia's focused on her studies and preparing for motherhood. Dr. Lam performed the ultrasound in careful silence, watching Lucia's face more than the screen. The girl stared at the ceiling, tears streaming down her cheeks, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Something was terribly wrong. Dr. Lam had seen teenage pregnancy anxiety before, but this felt different. This felt like terror. That evening, Dr. Lam couldn't shake the image of Lucia's frightened eyes. She'd given the girl her business card, as she did with all patients, but something made her emphasize the confidentiality of their relationship. "If you ever need to talk," she'd said quietly while Marco was distracted with paperwork, "about anything at all, you can call me. Everything we discuss is private." Lucia had nodded almost imperceptibly and slipped the card into her shoe. 3 days later, Dr. Lam found an envelope slipped under her office door. Inside was a note written in careful childish handwriting: "Please meet me at the park on 5th Street tomorrow at 3 p.m. Come alone. I need help, but he can't know." Dr. Lam's heart raced as she read the words. Every protocol told her to contact child services immediately, but something about Lucia's desperation made her pause. If she was wrong, she could destroy a family's trust. If she was right, moving too quickly could put Lucia in greater danger. The next afternoon, she found Lucia sitting on a bench near the playground, a manila envelope clutched in her lap. The girl looked even thinner than she had at the clinic, her pregnancy barely visible beneath loose clothing. "Thank you for coming," Lucia whispered, glancing around nervously. "I didn't know who else to trust." She handed Dr. Lam the envelope with shaking hands. "I took these when he wasn't looking. I've been hiding them for months, waiting for someone who might believe me." Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Images that made Dr. Lam's stomach turn and her hands shake. Pictures of Lucia at various ages, documenting years of abuse. Pictures that told a story too horrific for words. "He said no one would ever believe me," Lucia said, her voice barely audible. "He said I was his family and families protect each other. But Dr. Lam, I can't protect this baby if I don't protect myself first." The truth hit Dr. Lam like a physical blow. The father of Lucia's baby wasn't some absent teenage boyfriend. It was Marco himself. I need you to help me get away from him, Lucia continued. But I'm scared. He says if I ever tell anyone he'll kill me and make it look like an accident. He says no one will miss a pregnant runaway. Dr. Lam's mind raced through options, protocols, procedures. But looking at this brave girl who had risked everything to ask for help, she knew there was only one choice. We're going to get you safe, she promised. But we need to be very careful about how we do this. Dr. Lam spent that night making careful phone calls. She contacted Detective Sarah Martinez, a specialist in domestic violence and child abuse cases, explaining the situation with clinical precision while fighting to keep emotion out of her voice. We need to move fast, Detective Martinez told her. If he suspects she's talked to someone, he might disappear with her. But we also need to be strategic. We'll need those photographs as evidence and we'll need Lucia's testimony. The plan was set for the following evening. Social workers and police would coordinate a welfare check, using Dr. Lam's medical concerns about Lucia's pregnancy as the initial reason for the visit. Once inside, they would assess the situation and hopefully remove Lucia safely. But Marco Reyes was more dangerous than anyone realized. On Tuesday evening, 6 police officers approached the modest 2-story house on Maple Street. Detective Martinez rang the doorbell, flanked by 2 uniformed officers, while backup units positioned themselves around the property. The door opened to reveal a man in his early 40s, average height with graying hair and suspicious eyes. Marco Reyes looked like any other suburban father, which made the truth even more chilling. Mr. Reyes? I'm Detective Martinez. We have some concerns about the welfare of Lucia Reyes. May we come in? Marco's demeanor shifted instantly. What kind of concerns? Lucia's fine. She's upstairs resting. Sir, we'd like to speak with her directly. It's routine in cases involving pregnant minors. That's when everything went wrong. Marco stepped back into the house and slammed the door. Through the walls, they could hear him shouting Lucia's name, his voice filled with rage. Then came the sound of running footsteps and Lucia's terrified screams. He's dragging her upstairs. Martinez shouted into her radio. All units, we need entry now. The battering ram struck the front door with devastating force. Officers poured into the house, shouting commands, but Marco and Lucia were nowhere to be found on the ground floor. Then came the sound they all dreaded, a window shattering overhead and Marco's voice screaming from the roof. Stay back. I'll kill her before I let you take her. The scene outside the house transformed into controlled chaos. Emergency vehicles arrived in waves. Fire trucks, ambulances, negotiators and specialist units. Portable floodlights turned the dark street into day, casting harsh shadows across the crowd of neighbors who had gathered despite police attempts to keep them back. On the roof, Marco stood near the edge, one arm wrapped around Lucia's waist, the other hand gripping her wrist so tightly that even from the ground, officers could see her fingers turning blue. You don't understand. Marco screamed at the assembled officers. She's my daughter. My family. You have no right to interfere. Lucia was visibly pregnant now, her torn shirt revealing the curve of her belly. She kept one protective hand over her unborn child while tears streamed down her face. Her lips moved in what looked like prayers. Mr. Reyes, called the police negotiator through a megaphone, we want to help your family. But first we need you to step away from the edge. Let's talk about this safely. There's nothing to talk about. Marco's voice cracked with desperation and rage. Lucia, tell them. Tell them you're happy. Tell them you want to stay with me. But Lucia couldn't speak. Terror had stolen her voice, leaving only broken sobs that carried across the yard like the sound of something dying. That's when a silver sedan pulled up to the police barricade, and a woman emerged, pushing past officers despite their attempts to stop her. Lucia, she screamed. Baby, I'm here. Mama's here. It was Daniela Reyes, Lucia's biological mother, whom Marco had kept away through legal manipulation and systematic isolation. Dr. Lam had contacted her through social services, and she had driven 3 hours to reach her daughter. Mama? Lucia's voice carried across the yard, barely a whisper but filled with desperate hope. Marco's grip on her tightened. She's not your mother anymore. I raised you. I protected you. I loved you when she abandoned you for drugs. But seeing her mother had given Lucia something she'd lost years ago, the memory of love without conditions, of protection without price, of family without fear. Let me go, she said, her voice growing stronger. Please, Papa. Let me go to my mama. Never. Marco's voice turned savage. If I can't have you, no one can. The officers below watched in horror as Marco shoved Lucia toward the edge of the roof. Time slowed to a nightmare crawl as her body pitched forward, her scream cutting through the night like a blade. But the fire department had been prepared for this moment. The inflatable safety cushion position below caught her fall, and she bounced once before rolling to safety, her hands still protectively covering her belly. Marco stood alone on the roof now, his leverage gone, his secret exposed. With nothing left to lose, he made one final desperate decision. He jumped. Marco's leap toward the adjacent building fell short by several feet. He crashed into the side of the neighboring house and tumbled to the ground, where officers immediately surrounded him. Conscious but injured, he was taken into custody without further resistance, his reign of terror finally over. Meanwhile, paramedics swarmed around Lucia, checking her vital signs and those of her unborn child. The fall onto the safety cushion had been traumatic, but initial assessments showed no immediate life-threatening injuries. "My baby," Lucia whispered as they loaded her into the ambulance. "Is my baby okay?" "We're going to take very good care of both of you," the paramedic assured her. "You're safe now." Daniela climbed into the ambulance beside her daughter, and for the first time in 4 years, mother and child were together. Lucia collapsed into her mother's arms, her body shaking with exhaustion and relief. "I'm sorry, Mama," Lucia sobbed. "I'm so sorry. He said you didn't want me anymore. He said you chose drugs over me." Daniela stroked her daughter's hair with trembling hands, her own tears falling freely. "Baby, I have been fighting to get you back every single day for 4 years. Every court hearing, every supervised visit he canceled, every night I went to sleep wondering if you were safe. I never stopped wanting you. I never stopped loving you." As the ambulance raced toward the hospital, Dr. Lam followed in her own car. The physician who had noticed what others missed, who had chosen to act on her instincts rather than ignore them, was determined to see this through to the end. At the hospital, she found Lucia in the emergency room, surrounded by medical staff but still reaching for her mother's hand. "Dr. Lam," Lucia said when she saw her. "You saved us. You saved my baby." "You saved yourself," Dr. Lam replied gently. "You were brave enough to ask for help. That took more courage than most adults possess." The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Marco's crimes. In the basement of the house on Maple Street, police discovered a hidden room that Marco had constructed after gaining custody of Lucia 4 years earlier. The walls were covered with photographs documenting his abuse, evidence of systematic grooming and control that stretched back to Lucia's earliest memories. Detective Martinez interviewed Daniela at the hospital, learning the painful history that had led to this moment. "I was 19 when Lucia was born," Daniela explained, her voice heavy with regret. "Her father and I weren't together and I was struggling with addiction. Marco was my ex-husband's brother, and he seemed like a stable influence. When child services got involved because of my drug use, he offered to take temporary custody. The temporary arrangement had become permanent through Marco's manipulation of the legal system and Daniela's genuine struggles with recovery. He had convinced courts that Daniela was unfit, while presenting himself as a dedicated uncle willing to sacrifice for his niece's well-being. "I got clean," Daniela continued. "I've been clean for 3 years. I had a job, an apartment, everything they said I needed. But Marco fought every attempt I made to regain custody. He told the courts I was unstable, that contact with me upset Lucia. He canceled supervised visits, claiming she was sick. The system believed him because he seemed so caring, so concerned for her welfare." Meanwhile, in another room, Child Protective Services worker Jennifer Collins was conducting a careful interview with Lucia. The girl's testimony was heartbreaking in its matter-of-fact delivery, describing years of isolated abuse presented to her as normal family life. "He homeschooled me," Lucia explained. "Said public school was dangerous, that other people would fill my head with lies about our family. I wasn't allowed to have friends or use the internet without him watching. He said the outside world would try to separate us because they didn't understand our special bond." The abuse had escalated gradually, with Marco using isolation and psychological manipulation to convince Lucia that their relationship was both normal and secret. "When I got pregnant," Lucia continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, "he said it proved how much we loved each other. He said the baby would be our fresh start, that we could be a real family. But I started having dreams about my mama, and I remembered what real love felt like. That's when I knew something was wrong." The moment that had saved her life was her decision to hide the photographs she found in Marco's desk, evidence he had kept as trophies of his control over her. "I knew if anyone saw them they would understand," she said. "I just had to find someone brave enough to look." Lucia spent 5 days in the hospital under careful observation. The fall from the roof had caused some complications, but both she and her baby were ultimately deemed stable. During those days, she and Daniela began the difficult process of rebuilding their relationship. "I need you to know," Lucia told her mother on the third day, "that I want to keep the baby. I know the circumstances are terrible, but she's innocent. She deserves love, and I want to give that to her." Daniela held her daughter's hand tightly. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you. We'll face this together, just like we should have been doing all along." Dr. Lam visited daily, not just as a physician but as an advocate for both mother and child. She helped connect them with specialized counselors, support groups for survivors of abuse, and resources for young mothers in crisis. "The healing will take time," she told them both. "But you've already taken the hardest step by choosing to trust someone with the truth." Legal proceedings moved swiftly. Marco was charged with multiple counts of child sexual abuse, imprisonment, and endangerment. The evidence was overwhelming, and his defense attorney advised him to accept a plea deal rather than force Lucia to testify in open court. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Social services worked to finalize Daniela's guardianship of Lucia, a process that was expedited given the circumstances. After 4 years of separation, mother and daughter were legally reunited. "We have our whole lives to rebuild," Daniela said as they prepared to leave the hospital. "And this time, no one can take you away from me." Lucia, now showing clearly in her pregnancy, smiled for the first time since Dr. Lam had met her. "I want her to know her grandmother," she said, touching her belly. "I want her to grow up knowing what real family looks like." 6 months later, Dr. Lam received a birth announcement in the mail. Baby Isabella Reyes had been born healthy at 7 pounds 2 ounces. The photograph showed Lucia, now 17, holding her daughter while Daniela smiled beside them both. They looked like a real family, not because they shared blood but because they had chosen love over fear. Lucia had enrolled in online high school courses and was working toward her diploma. Daniela had taken a new job with flexible hours so she could help care for Isabella while Lucia continued her education. They attended counseling together twice a week, slowly processing years of trauma and separation. "Some days are harder than others," Lucia wrote in a note accompanying the birth announcement. "But every morning I wake up in my mama's house holding my daughter, I remember what freedom feels like. Thank you for believing me when I couldn't believe myself." Dr. Lam kept the photograph on her desk, a reminder that sometimes the most profound heroism comes from simply paying attention to what others choose to ignore. Her colleagues often asked about the case that had made local headlines, but she always deflected their questions. "I just did what any doctor should do," she would say. "I listened to my patient." But privately she knew the truth was more complex. In a world that often fails to protect the most vulnerable, choosing to act on suspicion rather than hope for the best can mean the difference between life and death. Lucia's story spread through the medical community as a case study in recognizing signs of abuse. Dr. Lam began speaking at conferences, teaching other physicians to trust their instincts when something feels wrong, even when they can't articulate why. The house on Maple Street was eventually sold and demolished. The new owners built a garden where the old foundation had been, planting flowers that bloom every spring in defiant celebration of life's ability to flourish after devastation. Sometimes heroes don't wear uniforms or carry badges. Sometimes they carry stethoscopes and speak softly to frightened patients. Sometimes they are teenage girls who find the courage to ask for help when asking means risking everything. And sometimes the strongest voices are those that were once silenced, now speaking truth that can save others still trapped in darkness. Lucia, Daniela, and baby Isabella face a long road of healing, but this time they walk it together. In the end, love proved stronger than fear, truth more powerful than secrets, and hope more enduring than the darkest chapters of the past. Their story reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to act despite being terrified. And sometimes that decision changes not just one life but generations to come. What would you do if this was your daughter?